Marcus sneered as he handed me the termination papers, but he had no idea that in just 48 hours he'd be begging me to take his call. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who called my attitude problems a liability was about to discover that his company's survival depended entirely on my goodwill. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning started like any other at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. I walked into the downtown Chicago office at exactly 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before my official start time, a habit I'd maintained for the past 3 years. The familiar hum of computers and the aroma of overpriced coffee from the lobby cafe filled the air as I made my way to my desk in the account management department. "Sarah!" Marcus Williams, our department head, called out from his corner office. His voice carried that particular edge that had become all too familiar over the past 6 months. "Conference room, now." I glanced at my watch. 7:52 a.m. Most of our colleagues hadn't even arrived yet, but Marcus had developed a pattern of cornering me during these quiet morning hours when fewer witnesses were around. As I walked toward the glass-walled conference room, I caught the eye of Jennifer Chen, one of the few coworkers who still acknowledged my existence. She gave me a sympathetic look that spoke volumes. Marcus was already seated at the head of the polished mahogany table, his perfectly pressed navy suit and slicked-back brown hair giving him the appearance of someone who spent more time on his appearance than his actual work. Beside him sat his loyal lieutenant, Brad Morrison, a man whose primary qualification seemed to be his ability to laugh at Marcus's jokes and echo his opinions with unwavering enthusiasm. "Sit down, Sarah," Marcus said without looking up from his tablet. His tone was the same one you'd use to address a disobedient child. I took a seat across from them, my hands folded calmly in front of me. After 3 years of working at Pinnacle, I'd learned to maintain my composure, even when every instinct told me to walk out. "We need to discuss your performance," Marcus began, finally making eye contact. Again, this was the third such meeting in 2 months. Each time, the complaints became more vague, the criticisms more personal. Brad nodded along, his expression serious, as if he were participating in matters of national security rather than what was clearly a predetermined harassment campaign. "I've reviewed your client satisfaction scores," Marcus continued, sliding a printed report across the table. "While your numbers appear adequate, your attitude continues to be a problem. Several team members have expressed concerns about your collaborative spirit." I glanced at the report. My client satisfaction scores weren't just adequate, they were the highest in the department. A 98.7% satisfaction rating, with clients specifically praising my attention to detail, responsiveness, and strategic thinking. But Marcus had become an expert at spinning positives into negatives. "Could you be more specific about these concerns?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Brad leaned forward, clearly eager to contribute. "Well, for instance, during last week's team meeting, when Marcus suggested the new client onboarding process, you questioned whether we'd considered the impact on client timeline expectations. I asked a clarifying question about implementation logistics," I replied. "The client was sitting right there. I wanted to ensure we could deliver on our promises." "See, that's exactly the kind of attitude we're talking about," Marcus interjected, his voice rising slightly. "You undermined my authority in front of a client." A simple yes, Marcus, would have sufficed. "We could have addressed your concerns privately later." The client in question had been Robert Hamilton from Meridian Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had become one of our most profitable accounts over the past 18 months. What Marcus conveniently omitted was that after the meeting, Mr. Hamilton had specifically requested that I remain as his primary point of contact, praising my thoroughness and strategic thinking. "I understand your perspective," I said carefully. "However, I believe my responsibility to the client includes ensuring we set realistic expectations." Mr. Hamilton appreciated the transparency. Marcus's jaw tightened. This was the crux of our ongoing conflict. While he focused on saying yes to everything and dealing with problems later, I had built my reputation on honest communication and proactive problem solving. Clients trusted me because I didn't overpromise and underdeliver. "That's another thing," Brad chimed in. "You seem to think you have a special relationship with our clients. But you're not the account manager. Your account support. There's a hierarchy here. The distinction was laughable. My official title might have been Senior Account Coordinator, but I handled everything from strategy development to crisis management. I knew more about our clients' businesses than most of the actual account managers, including Marcus himself. I'm simply doing my job to the best of my ability, I replied. Your job is to support the team, not to grandstand, Marcus shot back. Your individualistic approach disrupts team cohesion. Marketing is about collaboration, Sarah. You can't be a lone wolf in this industry. Over the past year, I'd watched Marcus systematically sideline anyone who might threaten his position. 2 talented account managers had been transferred to other departments after similar attitude conversations. Another had quit after being passed over for a promotion that went to Brad, despite Brad having half the experience and none of the client relationships. The pattern was clear. Marcus felt threatened by competence. He preferred a team of yes-men who would make him look good without challenging his authority or highlighting his limitations. Unfortunately for him, I had never been particularly good at playing politics. I want to be clear about something, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied expression. Your performance review is coming up next month. If we don't see significant improvement in your attitude and team collaboration, we'll have to consider whether Pinnacle is the right fit for you. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Brad nodded sagely, as if he'd just witnessed profound wisdom being dispensed. What specific behaviors would you like me to change? I asked. Marcus exchanged a glance with Brad before responding. For starters, stop questioning decisions in front of clients. When I present a strategy or timeline, your job is to support it, not to nitpick details. Second, you need to be more of a team player. Attend optional social events. Participate in the group conversations. Show that you're invested in our department culture. The optional social events were Marcus's pet project. Happy hours and team-building activities that inevitably turned into Marcus worship sessions. I'd attended a few early on, but watching grown professionals compete for his approval had been more depressing than motivating. And third, Marcus continued, you need to remember your place in the hierarchy. I'm the department head for a reason. My decisions shouldn't be second-guessed by support staff. I took a deep breath, considering my response carefully. The old Sarah might have apologized and promised to do better, but after months of watching Marcus take credit for my work while simultaneously undermining my credibility, I'd reached my limit. I understand your concerns, I said finally. However, I think there might be some confusion about my role and contributions here. My job description includes strategic input and client relationship management. When I ask questions or provide feedback, it's because I'm trying to ensure we deliver the best possible results for our clients. Marcus's face flushed red. Are you arguing with me right now? Because this is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't seem to accept feedback without getting defensive. I'm not being defensive. I'm trying to understand how to balance my job responsibilities with your expectations. If you want me to simply nod and agree with everything, regardless of whether it serves our clients' best interests, that's a fundamental change to how I've been doing my job for 3 years. Brad was practically vibrating with excitement at this point. He'd been waiting for me to give Marcus ammunition, and he clearly felt like Christmas had come early. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. I think you need to take some time to seriously consider whether you want to be part of this team. Because frankly, your attitude right now is proving my point. The meeting ended with Marcus dismissing me with a wave of his hand, as if I were a servant who had overstayed her welcome. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel the eyes of my coworkers on me. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed relieved that they weren't in my position. I spent the rest of the morning working on the Morrison account presentation, a project that had somehow become my responsibility despite Brad being the official account manager. The client was expecting a comprehensive digital marketing strategy by Friday, and Brad had readily volunteered my services while taking credit for the concept. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Sarah, this is David Chen from Titan Dynamics. Could we meet for coffee this afternoon? I have a proposition that might interest you. David Chen. I recognized the name immediately. He was Jennifer's brother and the founder of Titan Dynamics, one of Chicago's fastest-growing tech companies. We'd met briefly at Jennifer's birthday party 6 months ago, where we'd had an interesting conversation about the challenges of scaling marketing operations in the startup world. I glanced around the office. Marcus was in his glass-walled office, talking animatedly on his phone while gesturing dramatically. Brad was at his desk, probably working on his fantasy football lineup. The rest of the team was either at lunch or buried in their work. I texted back, "I can meet at 3 p.m. The roastery on Michigan Avenue? Perfect. See you then." The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus made a point of walking past my desk every 20 minutes, each time making some passive-aggressive comment about teamwork or attitude. During one particularly theatrical performance, he stopped to examine the Morrison presentation materials on my desk. "This looks good," he said loud enough for the entire department to hear. "Brad, nice work on the Morrison strategy. I can see you really understood their brand positioning challenges." Brad beamed with pride, accepting congratulations from nearby colleagues who had no idea he'd contributed nothing more than the client's name and logo to the project. I checked my watch. 2:45 p.m., time to leave for my meeting with David Chen. "I'm taking a break," I announced to no one in particular, grabbing my purse and jacket. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Marcus appeared at my desk as if summoned by some invisible signal. "Where are you going?" "I'm entitled to a 15-minute break," I replied calmly. "We have the Morrison presentation review at 3:30. You need to be here." "I'll be back in time." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Sarah, this is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. The team is depending on you, and you're prioritizing your personal time over work responsibilities." Several colleagues had stopped what they were doing to watch our exchange. I could see the familiar pattern forming. Marcus was setting up another public confrontation designed to make me look unprofessional and unreliable. "The presentation is ready," I said. "I've sent copies to everyone who needs them. If anything urgent comes up in the next hour, I'm reachable by phone." "That's not the point," Marcus replied, his voice getting louder. "The point is commitment. The point is being a team player. The point is that I'm taking my legally mandated break," I interrupted. "I'll see you at 3:30 for the presentation review." I walked toward the elevator, feeling the weight of 20 pairs of eyes on my back. Behind me, I could hear Marcus saying something to Brad about attitude problems and insubordination. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time all day, I allowed myself to smile. Whatever David Chen wanted to discuss, it had to be more interesting than another afternoon of Marcus's psychological warfare. The roastery was busy with the usual mix of business professionals, students, and remote workers. I spotted David immediately. He had Jennifer's distinctive cheekbones and confident posture. He was sitting at a corner table, typing on his laptop while nursing what appeared to be his second cup of coffee. "Sarah!" He stood up as I approached, extending his hand with a genuine smile. "Thanks for meeting me on short notice. Of course, Jennifer mentioned you were expanding your marketing team." "Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about." He gestured for me to sit down. "But first, can I get you something to drink?" As he went to the counter, I took a moment to observe him. David Chen was nothing like the stereotypical tech founder. No hoodie, no pretentious startup jargon, no air of superiority. He wore a simple button-down shirt and dark jeans, and his demeanor suggested someone who was successful but hadn't forgotten how to treat people with respect. He returned with a latte and sat down across from me. "So, Jennifer tells me, you're not particularly happy at Pinnacle." I nearly choked on my first sip of coffee. "She said that?" "She said you're dealing with a difficult manager who doesn't appreciate your talents. She also said you're the reason Pinnacle's client satisfaction scores are so high, despite getting none of the credit." I stared at him. "Jennifer talks a lot." David laughed. "She does? But she also has excellent judgment about people. She thinks you're wasted at Pinnacle, and from what I've observed, I think she's right." "What do you mean, from what you've observed?" David pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of a LinkedIn post. It was from Robert Hamilton, the CEO of Meridian Industries, one of Pinnacle's biggest clients. The post read, "Exceptional service from Sarah Mitchell at Pinnacle Marketing. Her strategic insights helped us increase our Q3 conversion rates by 34%. True partnership in action." My eyes widened. I hadn't seen this post, and I was certain Marcus hadn't either, or he would have found a way to take credit for it. "You see," David continued, "Titan Dynamics has been looking for a marketing partner for our upcoming product launch. We've been researching agencies, and Meridian Industries came up as a reference. When I asked Robert Hamilton specifically about Pinnacle, he didn't talk about your company, he talked about you." I felt my pulse quicken. What did he say? He said, and I quote, "If you can work directly with Sarah Mitchell, you'll get 10 times the value of any other agency. She understands business strategy, not just marketing tactics. But if you get stuck with their department head, run for the hills." I couldn't help but laugh. That sounded exactly like something Robert would say. He'd never been one to mince words, especially when it came to business relationships. "So here's my proposition," David said, leaning forward. "I don't want to hire Pinnacle, I want to hire you, directly." "I'm not freelancing," I said quickly. "I mean, I have a non-compete clause, and I'm not talking about freelancing." David's expression grew more serious. "I'm talking about joining Titan Dynamics as our Chief Marketing Officer." The words hung in the air between us. Chief Marketing Officer. At a rapidly growing tech company, reporting directly to the CEO, it was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about but never thought would materialize. "David, I'm flattered, but before you say no, let me tell you what we're building." He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. The screen showed a sleek dashboard interface with real-time analytics and automated workflow tools. "We're launching a B2B automation platform that could revolutionize how mid-sized companies handle their operations. Think of it as the missing link between small business tools and enterprise software." As he walked me through the product demo, I felt a familiar excitement building, the same feeling I got when I discovered a perfect marketing strategy for a challenging client. This wasn't just another SaaS product. It was a genuine solution to problems I'd observed across dozens of client relationships. "The market opportunity is massive," David continued. "We're projecting $50 million in revenue by year 3, but only if we nail the go-to-market strategy. We need someone who understands how to position complex solutions for practical business buyers. Someone who can build relationships, not just run campaigns." "What's the timeline?" I found myself asking. "We're launching in 6 months. I need someone to start building the marketing foundation now. Brand positioning, content strategy, sales enablement, partner relationships, the full ecosystem." It was exactly the kind of challenge I thrived on. Building something from the ground up, with the authority to make real decisions and implement strategies without having to navigate corporate politics or defend every choice to someone whose ego was more fragile than tissue paper. "What about compensation?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. David smiled. "Base salary of $120,000 plus equity that could be worth significantly more if we hit our growth targets. Full benefits, flexible work arrangements, and a $10,000 professional development budget. Plus, you'd have complete autonomy over your department once we start hiring your team." My current salary at Pinnacle was $68,000, with no equity, minimal benefits, and a professional development budget that consisted of Marcus occasionally forwarding me articles he'd found on LinkedIn. "I know it's a big decision," David said, "and I know leaving an established company for a startup involves risk. But I also know you're not reaching your potential where you are now." I checked my phone. 3:25 p.m. The Morrison presentation review would be starting in 5 minutes, and Marcus would undoubtedly use my absence as ammunition for his next performance management conversation. "I need to get back," I said, standing up. "Of course." David handed me his business card. "Think about it. But don't think too long. I'd like to make this happen quickly." As I hurried back to the office, my mind raced with possibilities. Chief Marketing Officer at a promising startup, working with a CEO who actually valued strategic thinking over office politics. The opportunity felt almost too good to be true. I made it back to Pinnacle with 2 minutes to spare, slipping into the conference room just as Marcus was arranging his papers with theatrical precision. Brad was already seated, looking pleased with himself for reasons I couldn't immediately identify. "Nice of you to join us, Sarah," Marcus said without looking up. I was just telling Brad how impressed I am with his Morrison presentation. Really creative approach to their brand challenge. Several other team members were present for the review, including Jennifer, who gave me a subtle questioning look. I shook my head slightly. I'd fill her in later. Marcus began presenting the Morrison strategy, reading directly from the slides I'd created while Brad nodded along, as if he were hearing the content for the first time. Watching someone else take credit for weeks of my work while I sat silently was nothing new, but today it felt particularly surreal. The key insight here, Marcus continued, is understanding that Morrison Industries isn't just selling industrial equipment, they're selling operational efficiency. Brad really nailed this positioning. I bit my tongue. The positioning strategy had come from a 2-hour conversation I'd had with Morrison's operations director, who'd explained how their clients measured success in terms of productivity gains, rather than equipment features. Brad had never spoken to anyone at Morrison beyond the initial introductory call. "Sarah," Marcus said suddenly, "since you worked on some of the supporting materials, do you have any thoughts on Brad's strategy?" It was a trap, and everyone in the room knew it. If I agreed enthusiastically, I'd be endorsing the fiction that Brad had developed the strategy. If I offered any substantive input, Marcus would accuse me of trying to steal credit or undermine Brad's authority. "I think the positioning is solid," I said carefully. "Morrison's decision-makers care about ROI above all else. The strategy addresses that priority." "Exactly," Brad said, beaming. "That's why I focused so heavily on the efficiency metrics in the campaign concept. The efficiency metrics that I'd spent 3 days calculating based on Morrison's historical data. The campaign concept that I'd developed after analyzing their previous marketing performance and identifying the messaging gaps that were costing them qualified leads." The presentation continued for another 20 minutes, with Marcus and Brad taking turns explaining strategies and insights that had originated from my client research. I sat quietly, taking notes and offering minimal input when directly asked, while mentally calculating how much notice I'd need to give if I decided to take David's offer. After the meeting, Marcus lingered as the room emptied. "Sarah, I want to talk to you about your participation in today's review." "Here we go," I thought. "You seem distracted," he continued, "almost disengaged. Brad put a lot of work into this presentation, and I expected more enthusiasm from the team." "I thought the presentation went well," I replied. "That's not the point. The point is attitude, support, collaboration." Marcus was building up to something. I could see it in his expression. "I've been doing some thinking since our conversation this morning, and I've decided we need to make some changes." My stomach dropped. "What kind of changes?" "Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning off the Morrison account. Brad will handle all direct client communication going forward. Your role will be strictly internal, research support, data analysis, administrative tasks." The demotion was swift and brutal. Morrison Industries had been my primary account for 18 months. I'd built the relationship from scratch, developed their entire marketing strategy, and helped them achieve their best conversion rates in company history. Now I was being relegated to administrative support while Brad took over the relationship. "Marcus, I don't think that's in Morrison's best interest," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The relationship is built on Pinnacle's expertise, not on any individual employee," Marcus interrupted. "This is exactly what I mean about attitude, Sarah. You seem to think you're irreplaceable, but the truth is, any competent account manager can handle Morrison's needs." Brad was hovering nearby, pretending to organize files while obviously listening to every word. His expression was a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. "I'll need you to prepare a complete handover document for Brad," Marcus continued. "All client contact information, project histories, strategy notes, performance data, everything. I want it completed by tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow morning?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Marcus, that's not enough time to properly document 18 months of—" "It's enough time if you prioritize efficiently," he cut me off. "Unless you're saying the account is too complicated for Brad to understand?" Another trap. If I insisted the handover needed more time, I'd be implying that Brad was incompetent. If I agreed to the timeline, I'd be setting both Brad and Morrison up for failure while making myself look like I'd been hoarding information. "I can have a preliminary handover ready by tomorrow," I said. but a complete transition should really take at least a week to ensure. Tomorrow morning, Sarah. Complete handover. Non-negotiable. Marcus walked away, leaving me standing in the empty conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Brad at his desk, already composing what appeared to be an email to someone at Morrison Industries. I returned to my desk and opened my laptop, staring at the massive task ahead of me. 18 months of relationship building, strategic development, and institutional knowledge needed to be condensed into a document that Brad could understand and Marcus could use to justify the transition. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Coffee tomorrow? You look like you need to talk." I typed back. "Rain check. Working late tonight, long story." As the office began to empty around 6 p.m., I was still at my desk, methodically documenting every interaction, strategy decision, and piece of client intelligence I'd accumulated. Marcus made a show of stopping by my desk before leaving. "Burning the midnight oil, I see," he said with false concern. "Make sure you get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day for Brad." I nodded without looking up from my screen. Around me, the office grew quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of the cleaning crew working on the floor below. By 9 p.m., I'd completed a 23-page handover document that covered everything from Morrison's organizational chart to their preferred communication styles to the strategic rationale behind every campaign we'd run. It was comprehensive enough that even Brad might be able to avoid completely destroying the relationship in his first month. But as I saved the document and prepared to leave, I realized something had shifted inside me. The humiliation of watching Brad take credit for my work, the casual cruelty of Marcus's power plays, the systematic dismantling of everything I'd built at this company, it had finally crystallized into something sharper than anger. It had become clear. I pulled out David Chen's business card and typed a text message. "I'm interested in discussing your offer further. When can we talk?" His response came back within minutes. "Tomorrow morning? My office at 9 a.m.? I'll be there." I hit send and then sat back in my chair, looking around the empty office that had been my professional home for 3 years. In less than 12 hours, I'd be walking into a conversation that could change everything. Nalcha. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus thought he was punishing me by taking away my biggest client. What he didn't realize was that he'd just freed me to pursue something infinitely better. I gathered my things and headed for the elevator, leaving the handover document on my desk for Brad to discover in the morning. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished steel, and for the first time in months, I was smiling. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, and Marcus Williams had no idea what was coming. I arrived at Titan Dynamics headquarters at 8:45 a.m., giving myself time to absorb the atmosphere before my meeting with David. The building was a converted warehouse in Chicago's West Loop, with exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. It was the complete opposite of Pinnacle's sterile corporate environment. The receptionist, a young woman with purple-streaked hair and a genuine smile, directed me to David's office on the 3rd floor. As I walked through the open workspace, I noticed something remarkable. People actually seemed happy to be there. Conversations were animated but focused. Collaboration appeared organic rather than forced, and there wasn't a single visible hierarchy chart or motivational poster in sight. David's office was a glass-walled space that managed to feel both professional and approachable. He was on a video call when I arrived, gesturing enthusiastically while discussing what sounded like product development timelines. When he saw me, he held up one finger and wrapped up the conversation. "Sarah, perfect timing." He stood up and shook my hand. "Thanks for coming in so early. I know you have to get to your current job." "About that," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I think we need to accelerate our timeline." David raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" I told him about the previous day's events, the Morrison account removal, the impossible handover deadline, Marcus's increasingly personal attacks. David listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. "So let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "They're taking away your biggest client, the one who specifically requested you, and giving it to someone who had nothing to do with building the relationship? That's the situation. And this is the same client who posted that LinkedIn recommendation about your work?" I nodded. "Robert Hamilton doesn't know about the transition yet. Brad is probably introducing himself this morning. David leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This is perfect. Perfect? How is any of this perfect? Because, David said, pulling up something on his computer, Robert Hamilton and I had dinner last night. My stomach dropped. What? I called him after our coffee meeting yesterday, told him I was considering hiring Pinnacle for our marketing launch, and asked if he could share some insights about working with them. David turned his laptop screen toward me. Want to guess what he said? The screen showed an email thread between David and Robert. I read the most recent message. David, glad we could connect last night. As I mentioned, Sarah Mitchell is the only reason to work with Pinnacle. She's brilliant, strategic, and actually understands business. Their department head is incompetent, and I'm honestly not sure how he still has a job. If Sarah ever leaves Pinnacle, I'd hire her in a heartbeat. Let me know if you need any other references. Robert, he said this last night? I asked, still staring at the screen. Before he knew about your situation. In fact, he mentioned that he was planning to expand his relationship with Pinnacle, specifically because of the work you've been doing. David closed the laptop. I'm guessing that conversation with Brad this morning isn't going to go as planned. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my blood run cold. Sarah, need to talk ASAP. Something's wrong with Morrison. Brad. Excuse me, I said to David, showing him the message. I think the morning just got interesting. David grinned. Take the call. Put it on speaker if you want. This should be educational. I dialed Brad's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with panic. Sarah, thank God. I just got off the phone with Robert Hamilton, and I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? He said he wasn't aware that Pinnacle was making account management changes, and he wants to know why you're being removed from his account. He seemed upset. I looked at David, who was trying not to laugh. What exactly did he say? He said, and I'm quoting here, if Sarah Mitchell isn't managing my account, then we need to have a serious conversation about whether Pinnacle is the right partner for Morrison Industries. Brad's voice cracked slightly. Sarah, what do I do? Marcus is in meetings all morning, and Mr. Hamilton wants an explanation by noon. Brad, I'm sure you can handle it, I said calmly. Just explain Marcus's reasoning for the transition. What reason? Marcus just said you were being moved to other projects. There it was, the moment when Brad realized he'd been used as a pawn in Marcus's game without being given any of the strategic context. He had no idea why the change was being made, no understanding of the client relationship, and no plan for managing the transition. I need you to come in early and brief me on everything, Brad continued. All the relationship history, the strategic background, the current projects, everything. Brad, I spent all night preparing a comprehensive handover document. It's on my desk. I know, I saw it, but it's 23 pages. I need you to walk me through it. Mr. Hamilton is expecting a call at noon, and I have no idea what to tell him. I checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. I'm in a meeting this morning. I'll try to get to the office by 11. A meeting? Sarah, this is an emergency. The Morrison account is worth $300,000 annually. Then maybe someone should have thought about that before making sudden changes to the account management team, I replied. I'll see you at 11. I hung up and looked at David, who was shaking his head in amazement. They really have no idea what they're doing, do they? He said. The blind leading the blind, I confirmed. So about your offer. David's expression became serious. Are you ready to make this happen? I want to accept your offer, I said, but I need to give notice ethically. 2 weeks minimum. What if I told you we could make this transition work in everyone's favor? David leaned forward. What if there was a way for you to leave Pinnacle on good terms while actually helping them understand what they're losing? I'm listening. Here's what I'm thinking. Titan Dynamics officially hires Pinnacle as our marketing agency, with you as the designated account manager. We'll structure it as a 3-month contract with a specific request for your involvement. During those 3 months, you'll gradually transition your Pinnacle clients to other team members while secretly building Titan's marketing foundation. I stared at him. You want to hire the company that I'm about to quit? I want to hire you through the company you're about to quit, David clarified. Think about it. Pinnacle gets a major new client, which makes everyone look good. You get to finish your current projects properly instead of abandoning your clients. And at the end of 3 months, when you officially join Titan directly, Pinnacle will understand exactly what they lost because they'll see the difference between working with you and working without you. It was brilliant, and devious, and completely ethical. There's one problem, I said. Marcus will never agree to let me manage a new major account. He's been systematically removing me from client relationships. David smiled. What if the client specifically requests you? What if Titan Dynamics makes it clear that the contract is contingent on Sarah Mitchell being the primary account manager? You would do that? I'm about to offer you a 6-figure salary and significant equity in my company, David said. You think I'm worried about ruffling some middle manager's feathers? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. Sarah, get to the office now, W. We have a Morrison crisis. I showed the message to David, who laughed out loud. Perfect timing, he said. Here's what we're gonna do. 20 minutes later, I walked into Pinnacle's offices to find controlled chaos. Brad was pacing outside Marcus's office, his hair disheveled, and his shirt already showing sweat stains despite the early hour. Through the glass walls, I could see Marcus on the phone, his face red with frustration. Jennifer intercepted me as I headed toward my desk. What's happening with Morrison? She whispered. Brad's been freaking out all morning, and Marcus has been yelling at people since 9 a.m. Just some transition challenges, I said casually. Nothing that can't be sorted out. Marcus's office door flew open, and he stormed out, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. Sarah, conference room. Now, Brad, you too. As we gathered in the conference room, Marcus slammed a printout on the table. It was an email from Robert Hamilton, timestamped 9:47 a.m. Marcus, I was surprised to learn this morning that Sarah Mitchell is being removed from the Morrison account. This decision was made without any consultation with Morrison Industries, despite our contract specifying account management continuity. I need to understand the rationale for this change and discuss how it affects our ongoing relationship. Please call me before noon to discuss. Robert Hamilton, CEO. Marcus looked like he'd swallowed something poisonous. Sarah, what did you tell him? I haven't spoken to Mr. Hamilton, I replied truthfully. Then how does he know about the account transition? Brad shifted uncomfortably. I called him this morning to introduce myself as the new account manager. I thought that was the right protocol. You thought? Marcus's voice rose. You thought it was appropriate to call our biggest client and announce major changes without any preparation or context? You said to take over the account immediately, Brad protested. I was following your instructions. I watched the dynamic play out with fascination. Marcus had created this situation with his impulsive power play, but now he needed someone to blame for the consequences. Brad was the obvious scapegoat, but throwing him under the bus would mean admitting that the transition plan was flawed from the beginning. Sarah, Marcus said, turning to me with barely controlled rage, you need to fix this. Call Hamilton and smooth things over. Explain that this is a positive change that will benefit Morrison Industries. I'm not sure that's appropriate, I replied. You specifically removed me from the account yesterday. Having me call the client now would send mixed messages about who's actually responsible for the relationship. Marcus's eye twitched. Are you refusing to help resolve this situation? I'm pointing out that you have a decision to make. Either I'm managing the Morrison account or Brad is. But you can't have it both ways. The room fell silent. Through the glass walls, I could see other employees pretending to work while obviously straining to hear our conversation. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. He needed me to save the Morrison relationship, but reinstating me would be admitting that removing me was a mistake. His pride was at war with his panic. Fine, he said finally. You'll remain on the Morrison account as senior support. Brad will still be the primary account manager, but you'll handle the client communication during this transition period. It was a face-saving compromise that satisfied no one and solved nothing, but it was exactly what I'd expected from Marcus. I'll need full authority to make decisions about strategy and client communication, I said. If I'm responsible for managing the relationship, I need to be able to act without checking every decision with Brad. Marcus nodded reluctantly. Fine, just fix this. I stood up to leave, then paused as if I'd just remembered something. Oh, there's one other thing. I have a meeting this afternoon with a potential new client. They specifically requested me based on a referral from Robert Hamilton. Marcus's expression shifted from anger to confusion to greedy interest in about 3 seconds. A new client? How big? Titan Dynamics. They're a tech company planning a major product launch. The contract would be worth about $500,000 over 6 months. Brad's eyes widened. Even Marcus looked impressed despite himself. They want to meet this afternoon to discuss the engagement, I continued. The CEO specifically asked for me to be the account manager. Apparently, Robert Hamilton recommended my work. I could see Marcus's mental calculator working overtime. A $500,000 contract would be the biggest new business win of his tenure as department head. It would more than offset any problems with the Morrison account and position him for a promotion. Of course, he said, his tone suddenly much more respectful. Whatever you need to make that happen. This could be huge for the department. I'll need Brad to handle the Morrison call with Robert Hamilton, I said. I'll brief him beforehand, but the new client meeting takes priority. Marcus nodded eagerly. Absolutely. Brad can handle Morrison. You focus on landing Titan Dynamics. I left the conference room with Brad trailing behind me, looking like a man who'd just been told he had to perform surgery without any medical training. Sarah, he whispered as we walked back to our desks, what am I supposed to tell Robert Hamilton? I pulled up the handover document on my computer and highlighted the section about Morrison's current strategic priorities and ongoing projects. Tell him exactly what's in here, I said. Be honest. Say you're excited to be working with Morrison Industries and that you've been thoroughly briefed on their objectives. Answer his questions directly, and if there's anything you don't know, tell him you'll research it and get back to him. Brad nodded frantically, taking notes on everything I said. And Brad, I added, don't try to impress him with big ideas or strategic insights. Robert Hamilton values competence over creativity. Just focus on demonstrating that you understand his business and his goals. As Brad hurried off to prepare for his call, I sat back in my chair and checked my phone. David had texted, "Meeting with Pinnacle at 2 p.m. conference room booked. This is going to be fun." I smiled and typed back, "See you then." Marcus has no idea what's coming. The morning had unfolded exactly as David had predicted. Marcus's impulsive decisions and poor planning had created a crisis, and now he was desperate enough to give me whatever I needed to land the Titan Dynamics contract. What he didn't realize was that landing the contract was never in question. The real question was how long it would take him to understand that he'd just agreed to the terms of his own professional humiliation. By 2 p.m., Marcus would be sitting across from David Chen, practically salivating over a $500,000 contract, completely unaware that he was negotiating with the man who was about to steal his best employee and expose his incompetence to the entire industry. I spent the rest of the morning putting finishing touches on the Morrison handover and preparing for what would undoubtedly be the most interesting client meeting of my career. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus appeared at my desk wearing his best suit and a smile so forced it looked painful. He'd clearly spent his lunch break preparing for what he believed would be the most important client meeting of his career. "Sarah, ready for the Titan Dynamics meeting?" His voice carried a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. "I've prepared some talking points about our agency's capabilities and our strategic approach to tech sector marketing." I looked up from my computer, where I'd been putting the finishing touches on a transition plan that Marcus would discover soon enough. "Actually, Marcus, I think it would be better if you let me take the lead on this one. The CEO specifically requested me, and tech companies can be particular about relationship dynamics." Marcus's smile faltered slightly. Of course. But as department head, I should at least be present to discuss our agency's overall capabilities and establish the senior-level relationship." "Absolutely," I agreed. "Your presence will definitely make an impression." Brad rushed over, looking frazzled but slightly more confident than he had that morning. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you for the Morrison briefing. The call with Robert Hamilton went, well, it went okay. He seemed satisfied with my understanding of the account, though he did ask several times when you'd be available for strategic consultation." "That's great, Brad." I'm sure you'll do fine managing the relationship going forward. Marcus checked his watch. We should head to the conference room. I want to review our presentation one more time before the client arrives. As we walked toward the conference room, I caught Jennifer's eye. She gave me a subtle thumbs up. Clearly, she'd heard about the potential new client and was rooting for my success. If only she knew what was really about to happen. The conference room had been set up with Pinnacle's standard new client presentation materials: glossy brochures, case study portfolios, and a laptop connected to the large wall-mounted screen. Marcus had even ordered coffee and pastries from the expensive cafe down the street. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our positioning for this meeting," Marcus said, arranging papers on the conference table. "We should emphasize our integrated approach to digital marketing and our track record with B2B clients. I'll handle the introductory presentation, you can discuss the specific tactical execution, and together we'll demonstrate the depth of our capabilities." I nodded, checking my phone. David had texted that he was in the building and would be up in 5 minutes. "One thing, Marcus," I said. David Chen is very direct in his communication style. He doesn't like a lot of marketing speak or lengthy presentations. He prefers to cut straight to strategic discussions. "Good to know. I can adapt my approach." Marcus straightened his tie and practiced his handshake. "This could be the account that puts our department on the map, Sarah. $500,000 would represent a 40% increase in our annual revenue." At exactly 2 p.m., there was a knock on the conference room door. Marcus practically leaped to his feet, his face lighting up with anticipation. "That must be our client," he said, moving toward the door. "Remember, professional but friendly. We want to establish trust while demonstrating competence." Marcus opened the door with a flourish, extending his hand toward David with practiced enthusiasm. "Mr. Chen, welcome to Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. I'm Marcus Williams, head of our account management department." David shook Marcus's hand with a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Marcus. Thank you for making time for this meeting." "Of course. We're always excited to explore new partnerships." Marcus gestured toward the conference table. "Please, have a seat. Can I get you some coffee? We have some excellent pastries from—" "Coffee would be great," David interrupted gently, taking a seat across from where Marcus had obviously planned to sit. "Black, no sugar." As Marcus busied himself with the coffee service, clearly trying to make a good impression, David caught my eye and smiled. The surreal nature of the situation, watching Marcus unknowingly serve coffee to the man who was about to destroy his carefully constructed world, was almost too much to process. "So, Mr. Chen," Marcus began, settling into his chair with his own cup of coffee, "Sarah tells me you're planning a significant product launch and looking for a marketing partner to help execute your go-to-market strategy." "That's right," David replied. "We're launching a B2B automation platform that we believe has significant market potential, but we need the right marketing expertise to position it correctly." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes lighting up. "Well, you've come to the right place. Pinnacle has extensive experience in the B2B technology sector. In fact, we've helped dozens of companies successfully launch new products and penetrate new markets." I watched David's expression remain politely neutral as Marcus launched into his standard new client presentation. It was the same pitch I'd heard him give dozens of times: generic talking points about integrated solutions and data-driven strategies that could apply to any industry or client. "Our approach centers on understanding your unique value proposition and translating that into compelling messaging that resonates with your target audience," Marcus continued, warming up to his favorite topic. "We believe in combining creative excellence with analytical rigor to deliver measurable results." David nodded politely. "That sounds comprehensive. Can you tell me about a specific example where you've helped a tech company launch a new product?" Marcus's confidence flickered for just a moment. Most of our tech sector experience had come through my work on various accounts, including several successful product launches that I'd managed with minimal input from him. "Absolutely," Marcus said, recovering quickly. "Just last year, we helped TechFlow Industries launch their new inventory management software. The campaign exceeded their lead generation targets by 30%. I had to admire his audacity. TechFlow has been my account from day one." I'd developed their entire go-to-market strategy, managed the campaign execution, and built the client relationship that led to contract renewals worth over $200,000 annually. Marcus had attended exactly 2 meetings with TechFlow, both times as my backup when I had scheduling conflicts. Impressive, David said. And who was the primary account manager for that engagement? Marcus smiled confidently. I personally oversaw the strategic development, with Sarah handling much of the day-to-day execution. It's a collaborative approach that allows us to combine senior-level strategic thinking with detailed, tactical implementation. David's eyebrows raised slightly. I see. And Sarah, what was your role in developing the TechFlow strategy? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I could feel Marcus's expectant gaze, confident that I would support his version of events. I developed the complete go-to-market strategy, I said clearly. From initial market research, through positioning, messaging, channel selection, campaign development, and performance optimization. I also managed all client communications and served as the primary strategic consultant throughout the engagement. Marcus's smile remained frozen, but I could see confusion creeping into his eyes. This wasn't the collaborative narrative he'd been expecting. The 30% lead generation increase came from my recommendation to shift the budget from broad awareness campaigns to targeted account-based marketing, I continued. I identified that TechFlow's ideal customers were concentrated in specific industry verticals and geographic regions, so we optimized the campaign accordingly. David nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Account-based marketing can be highly effective for B2B software companies when executed properly. He turned back to Marcus. And what was your specific contribution to that strategic development? Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He clearly hadn't expected to be pressed for details about his actual involvement. Well, as I mentioned, I provided the senior-level oversight and strategic direction, he said, his voice less confident than before. I ensured that our approach aligned with best practices and industry standards. Can you give me a specific example of a strategic decision you made or a recommendation you provided? David pressed gently. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Marcus glanced at me, obviously hoping I would jump in to support him, but I simply waited for his response. The overall strategic framework was something we developed collaboratively, Marcus finally said. Sarah is excellent at tactical execution, but high-level thinking and client relationship management requires more senior involvement. David's expression remained neutral, but I could see he was processing everything. I understand. Sarah, from your perspective, how would you describe the collaborative process? Another moment of truth. I could continue to play along with Marcus's fiction, or I could start laying the groundwork for what was coming. Marcus provided valuable input during our team meetings, I said diplomatically. However, I was responsible for the strategic development, client relationship management, and campaign optimization. The TechFlow engagement was successful because we were able to maintain direct lines of communication with their leadership team and make real-time adjustments based on performance data. Marcus was starting to look uncomfortable. This wasn't going according to his script. Mr. Chen, Marcus interjected, I think we're getting lost in the weeds here. The important thing is that Pinnacle delivered exceptional results for TechFlow, and we can do the same for Titan Dynamics. Our team approach ensures that you get both strategic expertise and flawless execution. David smiled. Absolutely. And speaking of team approach, I should mention that I've done some research on Pinnacle's work. I've spoken with several of your clients to get their perspectives on your services. Marcus perked up immediately. Excellent. I'm sure they had positive things to say. Client satisfaction is one of our key differentiators. They did indeed, David confirmed. In fact, Robert Hamilton from Meridian Industries was particularly enthusiastic about his experience with Pinnacle. Robert Hamilton, Marcus repeated, his chest puffing out with pride. Yes, the Meridian account is one of our crown jewels. Excellent client. Excellent results. He spoke very highly of the work, David continued. Specifically, he praised Sarah's strategic thinking and her ability to understand his business needs. He mentioned that she's been instrumental in improving their conversion rates and overall marketing performance. Marcus's smile became slightly strained. Yes, well, Sarah is definitely a valuable member of our team. In fact, David said, reaching into his briefcase and pulling out his phone, Robert sent me a very interesting email yesterday. Would you like to hear what he said about working with Pinnacle? Marcus nodded eagerly, apparently not noticing that I had suddenly become very still. David found the email and began reading. He said, quote, "Sarah Mitchell is the only reason to work with Pinnacle. She's brilliant, strategic, and actually understands business. Their department head is incompetent, and I'm honestly not sure how he still has a job." The color drained from Marcus's face as David continued reading. "If Sarah ever leaves Pinnacle, I'd hire her in a heartbeat. In fact, I'm only continuing our contract because of her involvement. The moment she's no longer managing my account, I'll be looking for a new agency." The conference room fell silent, except for the sound of Marcus's coffee cup rattling against its saucer as his hand began to shake. That's not," Marcus stammered, looking between David and me with growing panic. "Robert Hamilton has always been very satisfied with our service. The entire team has contributed to that success." David set down his phone and leaned back in his chair. "Marcus, I think there's something you should know about why I'm really here." Marcus's face had gone from pale to green. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I didn't request this meeting to hire Pinnacle as Titan Dynamics' marketing agency," David said calmly. "I requested this meeting to offer Sarah Mitchell a position as our chief marketing officer." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Marcus stared at David, then at me, then back at David, his mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. "You see," David continued, "I've been researching marketing talent in Chicago for several months. Sarah's name kept coming up in conversations with business owners and other executives. When I started digging deeper, I discovered that every single one of Pinnacle's most successful campaigns over the past 3 years had one thing in common. Sarah was the primary strategist and account manager." Marcus finally found his voice. This is highly inappropriate. You can't come into our offices under false pretenses to steal our employees." "I'm not stealing anyone," David replied evenly. "I'm offering a talented professional an opportunity that better matches her capabilities and contributions. And as for false pretenses, I was completely honest. I said I wanted to discuss a business relationship with Pinnacle. I just didn't specify what kind of relationship." Marcus turned to me, his expression a mixture of betrayal and desperation. "Sarah, surely you're not seriously considering this. After everything Pinnacle has done for you, after the opportunities we've provided." I looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. The man who had spent months systematically undermining my work, taking credit for my successes, and trying to force me out of the company was now appealing to my loyalty and gratitude. "Marcus," I said quietly, "what exactly has Pinnacle done for me?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's face cycled through several emotions: confusion, anger, and finally a desperate attempt at damage control. "Sarah, I think you're forgetting about your career development here," Marcus said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that I'd heard countless times before. "The mentorship, the growth opportunities, the chance to work with diverse clients." "Mentorship?" I repeated, unable to keep the incredulity out of my voice. "Marcus, in 3 years, you've never once provided constructive feedback that improved my work. Every development conversation we've had has been about changing my personality to better fit your management style." David watched the exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing a car crash in slow motion. "That's not fair," Marcus protested. "I've given you opportunities to work on major accounts, to take on challenging projects. You've given me the opportunity to do your job while you took credit for the results," I interrupted. "Yesterday you literally took the Morrison account away from me and gave it to Brad, despite knowing that I'd built that relationship from scratch." Marcus's composure was cracking. The Morrison situation was a strategic decision based on resource allocation and professional development opportunities for the entire team. "The Morrison situation was you punishing me for questioning your authority," I said flatly. "Just like removing me from the TechFlow account last month was punishment for suggesting a different approach to their campaign strategy. Just like relegating me to research support on the Henderson project was punishment for pointing out flaws in your initial proposal." David leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, it sounds like there's been a pattern of management challenges." "That's one way to put it," I replied. "Marcus, do you want to tell David about our conversation yesterday morning?" The one where you said my attitude problems were a liability and that I needed to learn my place in the hierarchy? Marcus's face flushed red. That conversation was taken out of context. We were discussing professional development and team dynamics. We were discussing your insecurity about having someone on your team who actually understands strategy and client relationships. I shot back. You've spent the last year systematically trying to undermine my credibility because you're threatened by the fact that clients request me specifically. The mask was coming off completely now. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. This is completely unprofessional, he said, his voice rising. David, I don't know what Sarah has told you, but she's clearly disgruntled and presenting a very one-sided view of our working relationship. David remained calm. Actually, I haven't relied solely on Sarah's perspective. As I mentioned, I spoke with Robert Hamilton. I also spoke with Janet Morrison from Morrison Industries, Kevin Walsh from TechFlow, and Linda Chen from Meridian Financial Services. He paused. Interestingly, all of them mentioned Sarah by name as the primary reason they continue working with Pinnacle. Marcus sat back down heavily, the fight going out of him as he realized the scope of David's research. But more importantly, David continued, I spent yesterday evening reviewing Pinnacle's public case studies and comparing them with the LinkedIn profiles and work histories of your team members. It's remarkable how many of your agency's biggest successes coincide with projects that Sarah managed. I don't understand what you're trying to prove, Marcus said weakly. I'm not trying to prove anything, David replied. I'm simply explaining why I'm here. Titan Dynamics needs a marketing leader who can build relationships, develop strategies, and execute campaigns that drive real business results. Based on everything I've learned, Sarah is exactly that person. Marcus looked at me with something approaching desperation. Sarah, think about what you're doing. David's company is a startup. There's no guarantee it will succeed. You're walking away from a stable position at an established agency for, what, a gamble? I'm walking away from a toxic environment, where my contributions are minimized and my growth is actively stunted, I replied. I'm walking away from a manager who takes credit for my successes and blames me for his failures. That's not true, Marcus protested. I've always supported your career development. Really? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a saved email. Is that why you sent this message to HR last month? I read aloud. Sarah Mitchell continues to struggle with authority and team collaboration. Despite multiple coaching conversations, she remains resistant to feedback and tends to overestimate her contributions to team projects. I recommend closer supervision and a formal performance improvement plan to address these behavioral issues. Marcus's face went white. That was confidential communication. Jessica in HR thought I should be aware of the concerns being raised about my performance, I said. Especially since there was no documentation of these supposed, quote, coaching conversations, or any evidence of the behavioral issues you described. David was taking notes now, clearly fascinated by the unfolding drama. What Jessica didn't know, I continued, was that the week before you sent that email, Robert Hamilton had called the main office to specifically compliment my work on the Meridian campaign. Or that TechFlow had just renewed their contract with a 20% increase, specifically requesting that I remain as their primary contact. Sarah, you're mischaracterizing. I'm stating facts, I interrupted. Would you like me to continue? Because I have documentation of a lot of interesting patterns over the past year. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. The confident department head who had walked into this meeting expecting to close a major deal was now being systematically dismantled in front of a potential client. David closed his notebook and looked at Marcus. I think I've heard enough to understand the situation. Marcus, I want to be clear about something. Titan Dynamics will not be engaging Pinnacle's services. However, our offer to Sarah stands. Now wait just a minute, Marcus said, desperation creeping back into his voice. You can't come in here and… Actually, I can, David said firmly. Sarah is a free agent who can choose her own career path, and frankly, after what I've witnessed today, I'm more convinced than ever that she's being wasted here. Marcus turned to me one last time. Sarah, please, think about this rationally. We can work through whatever issues you think exist. Maybe we can discuss a promotion, or a raise, or… Marcus, I said quietly, 6 months ago, a promotion and a raise might have been enough. But this isn't about money anymore. It's about respect, professional growth, and the opportunity to work with people who value what I bring to the table. I stood up and extended my hand to David. I accept your offer. David smiled and shook my hand. Welcome to Titan Dynamics, Sarah. I think this is going to be a very productive partnership. Marcus watched our handshake with the expression of someone watching their house burn down. This is corporate espionage. You've orchestrated this whole thing to steal my employee. Your employee was planning to quit anyway, David said matter-of-factly. I just provided her with a better alternative than unemployment. That's not. She wasn't, Marcus stammered, then stopped as the implication sank in. You were going to quit? After yesterday's conversation about my attitude problems and the Morrison account removal, yes, I confirmed. I was planning to give my 2 weeks' notice tomorrow morning. The conference room fell silent as Marcus processed this information. His face went through several expressions before settling on something resembling panic. If you leave, I'll enforce your non-compete clause, he said suddenly. You can't work for a competing agency for 12 months. David and I exchanged glances. Marcus, I said, Titan Dynamics isn't a marketing agency. It's a software company. My non-compete specifically mentions advertising and marketing services firms. Besides, David added, even if there were a legal issue, I have excellent attorneys. And based on what I've learned about how Sarah's been treated here, I suspect we could make a compelling case for constructive dismissal. Marcus's shoulders sagged as his final card was played and discarded. There was a knock on the conference room door, and Brad's head appeared. Marcus? Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem with the Morrison account. Not now, Brad, Marcus said without looking up. It's urgent, Brad insisted, stepping into the room. Robert Hamilton just called and canceled their contract. He said he was disappointed to learn about internal management changes and didn't feel confident in the agency's direction. The room fell silent again. Marcus stared at Brad as if he'd just announced the end of the world. He canceled the entire contract? Marcus asked weakly. Effective immediately, Brad confirmed. He mentioned something about wanting to work with Sarah directly, if she ever started her own consulting practice. David coughed politely. Actually, Sarah will be joining Titan Dynamics as our Chief Marketing Officer, and one of her first projects will be evaluating potential marketing partners for our product launch. Brad looked confused, glancing between David, Marcus, and me. I don't understand. Brad, I said gently, meet David Chen, CEO of Titan Dynamics. David, this is Brad Morrison, who was just assigned to manage the Morrison account that no longer exists. Understanding dawned on Brad's face, followed quickly by something resembling terror. So when you said you were meeting with a potential client, I was meeting with my future boss, I confirmed. Brad looked at Marcus, who was staring at the conference table as if trying to make sense of a foreign language. Marcus, Brad said hesitantly, what do we do about the Morrison account? That's $300,000 in annual revenue. There is no Morrison account, Marcus said flatly. It's gone. But surely we can fix this. Maybe if Sarah talked to Robert Hamilton. Sarah doesn't work here anymore, Marcus said, his voice hollow. David stood up and gathered his materials. Sarah, why don't you take the rest of the day to handle your transition planning? You can start at Titan Dynamics on Monday. Actually, I said, I'd like to finish out the week here. I have a few client obligations I want to handle properly. David nodded. Of course. Professional to the end. As David prepared to leave, he turned back to Marcus. For what it's worth, you had one of the most talented marketing professionals in Chicago working for you. If you'd recognized that and treated her accordingly, this meeting could have gone very differently. After David left, the conference room felt like a tomb. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, staring at the expensive pastries he'd ordered to impress the client who had just stolen his best employee and cost him his biggest account. Sarah, he said finally, is there anything I can do to change your mind? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Marcus, 3 months ago, if you had come to me and said, Sarah, I think I've been handling our working relationship poorly, and I'd like to find a way to better support your career development. We might have worked something out, but you chose to see me as a threat instead of an asset. I never saw you as a threat, he protested weakly. Then why did you spend so much energy trying to diminish my role and limit my responsibilities? Marcus didn't have an answer for that. I gathered my things and headed for the door. I'll have transition documents prepared for all my accounts by Friday. Brad, I'll set aside time to brief you on the remaining clients if you want. What about Meridian Industries? Brad asked. And TechFlow? You'll need to ask them what they want to do, I said. But I suspect you'll be hearing from them soon. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel the eyes of the entire office on me. Word had clearly spread about the meeting, though I doubted anyone understood the full scope of what had just happened. Jennifer intercepted me halfway across the office. Is it true? Did you just quit? I accepted a position as CMO at Titan Dynamics, I said. Her eyes widened. Sarah, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you. Over the next few hours, my phone didn't stop ringing. Kevin Walsh from TechFlow called to congratulate me and ask about the possibility of bringing his account to Titan Dynamics. Janet Morrison called to discuss her options now that I wouldn't be available to manage her account. Linda Chen from Meridian Financial wanted to know if I'd be available for consulting work. By 5 p.m., Marcus had lost 4 major accounts representing nearly $800,000 in annual revenue. The department that had started the day celebrating a potential $500,000 new client contract ended it facing the biggest client exodus in company history. As I packed up my desk, Marcus appeared one last time. The partners are asking questions, he said quietly. They want to know how we lost so much business in one day. What are you going to tell them? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. The truth, I guess, that I made some poor management decisions and lost our most valuable team member. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in months. For what it's worth, Marcus, I hope you learn from this. You're not a bad person, but you're an insecure manager. The next time you have someone talented on your team, try building them up instead of tearing them down. I walked out of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions for the last time, leaving behind 3 years of frustration, politics, and wasted potential. As the elevator doors closed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement about what came next. Monday morning, I would walk into Titan Dynamics as their Chief Marketing Officer, with complete authority over strategy, budget, and team building. I would work with a CEO who valued results over politics and collaboration over control. But more than that, I would finally have the opportunity to build something meaningful, a marketing organization that prioritized client success, employee development, and ethical business practices. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had fired me for attitude problems, but what he'd really feared was my competence. He'd been so focused on protecting his position that he'd destroyed the very thing that made his department valuable. 2 weeks later, I heard through Jennifer that Marcus had been reassigned to a business development role with no direct reports. Brad had been promoted to interim department head, though the team he was managing consisted of just 3 junior employees and a handful of small accounts. Pinnacle never recovered from the client exodus. Within 6 months, the entire Chicago office had been consolidated into their Milwaukee headquarters, and most of the remaining staff had found positions elsewhere. As for me, I was exactly where I belonged, building something new, working with people who appreciated talent instead of fearing it, and finally getting the recognition I'd earned. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is getting fired by someone who was too insecure to deserve your loyalty in the first place. My second career had begun, and I'd never been happier. 6 months after walking out of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions, I stood in the sleek conference room of Titan Dynamics' new headquarters, looking out at the Chicago skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was spectacular, but what made it even better was knowing that we'd earned our place here through genuine success, not corporate politics. Sarah, the board presentation starts in 10 minutes, called Jessica Torres, my newly hired director of digital strategy. She was everything I'd wished I could have been at Pinnacle: confident, innovative, and unafraid to challenge ideas in pursuit of better solutions. Ready when you are, I replied, adjusting the slides on my laptop one final time. Today's presentation would showcase the results of our product launch campaign, and the numbers were even better than we'd projected. As team members filed into the conference room, I reflected on how much had changed since that fateful meeting with David Chen. The marketing department I'd built from scratch now consisted of 12 talented professionals, each hired for their expertise rather than their willingness to stroke anyone's ego. We'd launched Titan's automation platform to overwhelming market response, secured partnerships with 3 major industry players, and generated over $8 million in qualified pipeline revenue. David entered the room with several board members, his expression radiating the quiet confidence of a CEO whose company was exceeding all expectations. "Good morning, everyone," I began, clicking to the first slide. 6 months ago, Titan Dynamics was an unknown startup with a promising product and ambitious growth targets. Today, I'm pleased to report that we've not only met those targets, we've shattered them. The presentation unfolded smoothly, each metric telling the story of strategic thinking combined with flawless execution. Our cost per qualified lead was 40% below industry standards. Customer acquisition costs had decreased month over month, while customer lifetime value increased. Most importantly, our Net Promoter Score was 67, exceptional for a B2B software company. The success of our launch strategy, I continued, demonstrates what happens when marketing operations are built on data-driven decision-making rather than internal politics. Every campaign element was tested, optimized, and aligned with actual customer behavior patterns. Board member Patricia Wells, a veteran tech executive, raised her hand. "Sarah, these results are impressive, but can you speak to the sustainability of this growth rate? And how confident are you about scaling these operations?" "Excellent question," I replied. "Our success isn't based on luck or market timing. It's based on systematic processes that become more efficient as we scale. We've built automation into our lead scoring, content personalization, and campaign optimization. The team structure allows for rapid scaling without losing quality control." I clicked to the next slide, showing our hiring plan and projected performance metrics for the next 12 months. More importantly, we've created a culture where innovation is rewarded, and strategic thinking is encouraged at every level. When team members feel empowered to contribute ideas and challenge assumptions, the entire organization benefits. As I spoke, I couldn't help but think about the contrast with my former workplace. At Pinnacle, new ideas were threats to established hierarchies. Here, they were catalysts for growth. After the presentation, David approached me with a smile that spoke volumes. "Sarah, I have some news that I think you'll find interesting." "Good news, I hope." "The best kind." He pulled out his phone and showed me a news article. The headline read, "Pinnacle Marketing Solutions Closes Chicago Office, Cites Market Challenges." I read the article quickly, my eyebrows rising with each paragraph. The closure was described as a, quote, strategic consolidation, but the real story was clear to anyone who understood the industry. Pinnacle had lost too many major clients to remain viable in the Chicago market. "There's more," David said, scrolling to another article. "Look at this." The second headline made me pause. Former Pinnacle executive Marcus Williams starts independent consulting practice. The accompanying photo showed Marcus standing awkwardly in what appeared to be a rented office space, trying to project confidence despite obviously difficult circumstances. The article mentioned that his new venture would focus on, quote, boutique marketing solutions for small businesses. Independent consulting, I mused. That's quite a career pivot. "From what I've heard through industry contacts," David said, "he's struggling to find clients. Apparently, word has gotten around about what happened at Pinnacle." It wasn't that I felt vindicated. I'd moved so far beyond the Pinnacle situation that Marcus's struggles felt like ancient history. But there was something poetic about the complete reversal of our fortunes. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, who had also left Pinnacle shortly after my departure to join a boutique agency downtown. "Sarah, you'll never guess who just walked into our office asking about freelance opportunities." He looked rough. "Want to grab drinks and hear the whole story?" I smiled and typed back, "Rain check on drinks, but definitely want to hear this later." "Everything okay?" David asked, noticing my expression. "Just hearing about some interesting developments in the local marketing scene," I replied. Nothing that affects us directly. That evening, Jennifer and I met at an upscale wine bar in River North, the same neighborhood where Pinnacle's offices used to be. She looked fantastic. The stress lines that had marked her face during our final months at Pinnacle were completely gone. "Okay, you have to hear this," Jennifer said, settling into her chair with obvious excitement. "Marcus showed up at our office this afternoon looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. Apparently his consulting practice isn't going well." "Define not going well," I said, genuinely curious about how far he'd fallen. "He's had 3 clients in 6 months, and 2 of them fired him for missing deadlines and overpromising on deliverables. The third one, a small restaurant chain, is apparently paying him in trade rather than cash." I nearly choked on my wine. "Trade? You mean he's being paid for food?" "Free meals and catering for his business meetings," Jennifer confirmed. "Which would be fine if he actually had business meetings to cater, but from what I could see, he was pretty desperate for any kind of paid work." The irony was almost too perfect. The man who had lectured me about knowing my place and learning to take direction was now begging for freelance assignments from agencies that wouldn't have given him a second look when he was a department head. "What did your managing director tell him?" I asked. She was polite but firm. "Said they didn't have any current openings that matched his experience level." Jennifer grinned, which was a diplomatic way of saying they'd heard about his reputation and didn't want the liability. Reputation? Sarah, you have to understand. When 4 major clients leave an agency in one day specifically because of management changes, people notice. When an entire department collapses within 6 months of losing 1 employee, people talk. Marcus's name is basically toxic in the Chicago marketing community. I felt a moment of genuine sympathy for Marcus, despite everything he'd put me through. Professional exile was a harsh consequence, even for someone who had mismanaged his team and mistreated his employees. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "Brad Morrison, remember him? Apparently lasted 3 months as interim department head before he was let go. Word is he couldn't handle the pressure once all the experienced people left, and he actually had to develop strategies instead of just implementing other people's ideas. Where is he now? Last I heard, he was working at a small digital agency in the suburbs, doing social media management for local businesses. Quite a come down from managing 6-figure client relationships." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both of us processing how dramatically everyone's circumstances had changed. "You know what's funny?" Jennifer said finally. "At the time, watching Marcus tear you down was so frustrating because it seemed like he was getting away with it. But looking back, he was actually destroying his own career with every petty power play." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Every time he undermined you or took credit for your work, he was essentially advertising his own incompetence. The clients knew who was really delivering results. The other employees knew who was actually driving success. He thought he was protecting his position, but he was actually exposing how little value he added." She was right. Marcus's insecurity had made him so focused on short-term ego protection that he'd completely ignored the long-term consequences of his actions. "The beautiful thing," Jennifer continued, "is that you never had to actively destroy him. You just left, and his house of cards collapsed under its own weight." My phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it and smiled. It was from Robert Hamilton at Meridian Industries. "Sarah, I wanted to let you know that Meridian will be expanding our automation initiatives next quarter. Would Titan Dynamics be interested in discussing a potential partnership? I'd love to work with you again, and your new platform sounds like exactly what we need. Best regards, Robert." I showed the email to Jennifer, who laughed out loud. "And that," she said, "is how you win in the long run. By being so good at what you do that opportunities follow you wherever you go." The next morning, I arrived at Titan Dynamics to find David waiting in my office with coffee and what appeared to be several legal documents. "Good morning," he said, his expression serious but not concerning. "I have a proposition for you. I'm listening." The board was so impressed with yesterday's presentation that they've approved a significant expansion of the marketing department. We're planning to open a West Coast office, and we need someone to head up that operation. I set down my coffee, intrigued. "Are you offering me a promotion?" "I'm offering you the chance to build something even bigger," David said. "Vice President of Marketing. overseeing both Chicago and Los Angeles operations. Significant equity increase, substantial budget authority, and complete autonomy to structure the West Coast team however you think best. The offer was tempting, but I'd learned to ask the important questions. What's the timeline? And what would it mean for the team I've built here? That's the beauty of it. You wouldn't be leaving Chicago. You'd be splitting time between both offices, but Jessica and the team here are ready to handle day-to-day operations. You've built such a strong foundation that the department can function effectively with your oversight, rather than your constant presence. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I dreamed about during those frustrating years at Pinnacle: real leadership responsibility, strategic authority, and the chance to scale successful operations. There's one more thing, David said, sliding a newspaper across my desk. I thought you might find this interesting. The business section headline read, Titan Dynamics named Startup of the Year by Chicago Business Journal. The accompanying article highlighted our successful product launch, rapid customer acquisition, and innovative marketing approach. But what caught my attention was a small sidebar article titled, Marketing Executive Profile, Sarah Mitchell's Strategic Success. I read the brief profile, which described my career transition from underutilized talent at a traditional agency to driving force behind one of Chicago's most successful startup launches. The article quoted several industry executives who praised my strategic thinking and client relationship management. They want to do a longer feature article next month, David said, something about innovative marketing leadership in the startup ecosystem. I looked up at him, struck by the complete transformation of my professional life. 6 months ago, I'd been treated as a problem employee whose contributions were minimized and whose ideas were dismissed. Now I was being profiled as an example of marketing excellence. You know what the best part is? I said finally. What's that? Marcus will probably read this article and finally understand what he lost. Not because I'm trying to get revenge, but because the truth has a way of revealing itself over time. David nodded. Success really is the best vindication. As I considered his offer and reflected on how far I'd come, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. It was local. Sarah Mitchell, I answered. Sarah, this is Marcus Williams. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. I hope you don't mind me calling. I looked at David, who raised his eyebrows in surprise. This was a conversation I hadn't expected. Hello, Marcus. What can I do for you? I owe you an apology, he said, the words coming slowly as if they were difficult to form. I've had a lot of time to think about how I handled things at Pinnacle, and I realize I was wrong. About everything. The admission hung in the air. I could hear traffic noise in the background, suggesting he was calling from his car or possibly from outside. Bafeguda. I appreciate you saying that, I replied carefully. I saw the article about you in the Business Journal, Marcus continued. And I've been hearing about Titan Dynamics' success. You've accomplished everything I always said you couldn't do, and you've done it better than I ever could have. There was genuine humility in his voice, something I'd never heard during our years of working together. I was wondering, he said hesitantly, if you might be willing to meet for coffee sometime, not for business reasons, just, I'd like the chance to apologize properly and maybe get some advice about rebuilding my career. It was a remarkable reversal. The man who had once lectured me about attitude problems was now asking for my guidance. Part of me felt vindicated, but a larger part felt something approaching compassion. Marcus, I appreciate the call and the apology, I said, but I think the best advice I can give you is this. Focus on building something positive rather than dwelling on past mistakes. Find ways to add genuine value for clients, and treat your team members as assets rather than threats. You're right, he said quietly. I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did was wrong, and you deserved better. After the call ended, David looked at me with obvious curiosity. That was unexpected. It was, I agreed. But you know what? It doesn't change anything for me. I'm not angry anymore, and I don't need his apology to validate my success. That's probably the healthiest attitude. David said. So, about the VP position, are you interested? I looked around my office, at the team bustling with productive energy beyond the glass walls, at the evidence of genuine success, built on merit rather than politics. Absolutely, I said. Let's build something incredible. As I signed the documents for my promotion, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Getting fired for attitude problems had been the catalyst for discovering what I was truly capable of achieving. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the gleaming lobby of Titan Dynamics' new Los Angeles office, watching as our West Coast team prepared for their first major client presentation. The contrast with my old corporate environment was stark. Instead of rigid hierarchies and political maneuvering, I saw collaborative energy and genuine excitement about the work. "Sarah, the Nexus Technologies team just arrived," announced Maria Gonzalez, my newly hired West Coast marketing director. She was a brilliant strategist I'd poached from a major Silicon Valley agency, someone who understood both the technical aspects of B2B marketing and the relationship building that drove real results. The Nexus presentation was crucial. They were a $2 billion enterprise software company looking for a marketing partner to help launch their AI-powered analytics platform. Landing this account would establish Titan Dynamics as a serious player in the enterprise market and validate our expansion strategy. As I walked into the conference room, I was struck by how different this felt from those tense client meetings at Pinnacle. Here, I wasn't worried about internal politics or someone else taking credit for my work. I was focused entirely on delivering value for the client and growing our business. "Good morning, everyone," I said to the Nexus team, which included their CMO, 2 VPs, and their head of product marketing. "Thank you for considering Titan Dynamics as your marketing partner. I know you have many options, so I appreciate the opportunity to show you what sets us apart." The presentation flowed seamlessly. We demonstrated deep understanding of their market challenges, presented data-driven strategies for reaching enterprise buyers, and outlined a comprehensive approach that combined thought leadership, account-based marketing, and strategic partnerships. Most importantly, we showed them exactly how our platform could be positioned to disrupt their competitors' market share. "This is impressive work," said Rebecca Chen, Nexus's CMO, as we wrapped up the formal presentation. "But I have to ask, you're a relatively young company. How do I know you can handle the complexity and scale of an enterprise launch?" It was exactly the question I'd been expecting, and I had the perfect answer. "Rebecca, I understand your concern about working with a newer agency, but let me share something that might change your perspective." I clicked on a slide showing testimonials from our existing clients. Every one of these companies chose to work with us specifically because of our track record of delivering results, not because of our company's age. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a detailed case study of our work with Morrison Industries, the same account that Marcus had tried to take away from me. Robert Hamilton, CEO of Morrison Industries, moved his account from a 20-year-old established agency to work with us specifically because we demonstrated superior strategic thinking and execution. In 6 months, we've helped them achieve their best conversion rates in company history. Rebecca leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "Morrison Industries, aren't they pretty conservative when it comes to vendor relationships?" "Extremely conservative," I confirmed. "Which is exactly why their endorsement carries so much weight. They don't make changes lightly, but they recognize that fresh thinking and innovative approaches could deliver better results than traditional agency relationships." After the Nexus team left, promising a decision within a week, Maria and I debriefed in my temporary Los Angeles office. "That seemed to go really well," she said. Rebecca was taking notes throughout the entire presentation, and their head of product marketing asked for specific details about our analytics capabilities. "I'm cautiously optimistic," I replied. "But the real test will be whether they're willing to take a chance on innovation over established relationships." My phone buzzed with a call from David back in Chicago. "Sarah, I just got off the phone with someone very interesting," he said without preamble. "Oh, who was that?" "Janet Morrison from Morrison Industries. Apparently, she's been so impressed with our work that she's recommending us to other companies in her industry network. She specifically mentioned that you've transformed their approach to customer acquisition." I smiled. Client referrals were the ultimate validation. It meant we weren't just delivering services. We were creating genuine business value that clients wanted to share with their peers. There's more, David continued. She's organized a roundtable discussion for next month with 5 other manufacturing company executives who are looking for marketing partners. They want you to present our approach to B2B manufacturing marketing. The opportunity was significant. Manufacturing companies were notoriously relationship-driven in their vendor selection, but they were also incredibly loyal once they found partners who understood their unique challenges. That's fantastic news, I said. Manufacturing companies have complex sales cycles and highly technical products. Exactly the kind of challenge our platform is designed to address. Janet also mentioned something else that I thought you'd find amusing, David said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Apparently, she ran into Marcus Williams at an industry event last week. Really? How did that go? According to Janet, he approached her to ask about potential freelance opportunities with Morrison Industries. She told him they were very happy with their current marketing partner, meaning us, and wouldn't be making any changes. The irony was perfect. Marcus was now soliciting work from the very client he'd tried to take away from me, only to discover that the client had followed me to my new company. Janet said he looked surprised when she mentioned that Morrison was working with Titan Dynamics and specifically requested that I continue as their primary contact, I said. She said he went pale when he realized that not only had you landed on your feet, but you'd brought his former clients with you, David added. While part of me felt vindicated, I was more focused on the future than the past. Marcus's struggles were a cautionary tale, but they weren't my primary concern anymore. The next day brought even better news. Rebecca Chen called personally to inform me that Nexus Technologies had chosen Titan Dynamics as their marketing partner, signing a $750,000 annual contract with options for expansion. What sealed the deal for us, Rebecca explained during our kickoff call, was your team's depth of strategic thinking combined with the innovative platform capabilities. We've worked with several large agencies that had impressive credentials but couldn't match your level of insight into our specific market challenges. The Nexus win was transformational for Titan Dynamics. It established us as a serious player in the enterprise market and provided the foundation for scaling our West Coast operations. More importantly, it validated the approach I'd been advocating since my Pinnacle days, that genuine expertise and client focus would always outperform politics and relationship management. 2 months later, I found myself back in Chicago for the quarterly board meeting, preparing to present results that exceeded even our most optimistic projections. The marketing department I'd built was now generating over $15 million in qualified pipeline revenue annually. Our customer acquisition costs continued to decline while customer lifetime value increased, and our client retention rate was approaching 95%. Sarah, these numbers are exceptional, said board member Patricia Wells as I concluded my presentation. But I'm curious about your long-term vision. Where do you see the marketing organization in 2 years? Great question, Patricia. We're positioned to become the definitive marketing partner for mid-market B2B companies that need enterprise-level strategy with startup-level agility. Our unique combination of platform capabilities and strategic expertise creates sustainable competitive advantages that traditional agencies can't match. I clicked to my final slide, which outlined our expansion roadmap. Within 2 years, I envision regional offices in Austin, Seattle, and Boston, with specialized teams focused on different industry verticals. We'll be able to serve clients nationally while maintaining the personal relationships and customized strategies that drive our current success. After the meeting, David and I walked to a nearby cafe to discuss the future of our partnership. The conversation felt surreal compared to the tense performance reviews and political maneuvering that had characterized my final months at Pinnacle. I have something to tell you, David said as we settled into a corner table. I've been approached by 3 different venture capital firms about potential acquisition offers. My stomach dropped slightly. Acquisitions often meant leadership changes and cultural disruption. Exactly the kind of corporate upheaval I'd hoped to avoid by joining a startup. Before you worry, David continued, I want you to know that any acquisition discussion includes retention packages for key executives. More importantly, I've made it clear that any potential buyer would need to understand that you're integral to our success, and that disrupting the marketing organization would be counterproductive. What are you thinking about these offers? I asked. Honestly, I'm not ready to sell. We're building something special here, and I don't want to hand it over to a larger company that might not understand what makes us successful." David paused. "But I also know that the offers validate what we've accomplished. 2 years ago, Titan Dynamics was just an idea. Now we're being courted by major players who recognize our potential." The recognition felt satisfying. But what mattered more was the knowledge that our success was built on sustainable foundations rather than market timing or lucky breaks. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into preparing for the manufacturing company roundtable that Janet Morrison had organized. The 5 companies represented over $500 million in combined annual revenue, and each faced similar challenges around digital transformation and customer acquisition in traditionally relationship-driven markets. The presentation I developed focused on bridging the gap between manufacturing companies' preference for personal relationships and the digital marketing strategies needed to compete in modern markets. Instead of trying to replace traditional relationship building, we showed how technology could enhance and scale those relationships. The roundtable itself took place at an exclusive business club in downtown Chicago, the kind of venue where million-dollar deals were discussed over handshakes and decades-old business relationships were maintained through quarterly golf outings. "Ladies and gentlemen," Janet Morrison began, addressing the assembled executives, "I've invited Sarah Mitchell here today because her team has fundamentally transformed how Morrison Industries approaches customer acquisition. In 18 months, we've seen improvements that our previous marketing partners couldn't achieve in 5 years. As I presented our approach to B2B manufacturing marketing, I could see the executives processing how these strategies might apply to their own businesses. These weren't people who made decisions quickly or changed vendors casually, but they were also practical business leaders who recognized value when they saw it." "Sarah," asked Tom Bradley, CEO of Precision Manufacturing Solutions, "this is all very impressive, but how do we know these digital strategies won't alienate our traditional customer base? Our buyers are engineers and operations managers who value personal relationships over flashy marketing campaigns." "Tom, that's exactly why our approach is different," I replied. "We're not trying to replace personal relationships with digital campaigns. We're using digital tools to identify the right prospects, provide them with valuable information, and facilitate more meaningful conversations with your sales team." I clicked on a case study showing how we'd helped Morrison Industries increase qualified leads by 60% while actually improving the quality of sales conversations. The key is understanding that modern B2B buyers, even in traditional industries, do significant research before engaging with sales teams. Our job is to ensure they find accurate, helpful information about your capabilities and see your company as the obvious choice when they're ready to have those important conversations. By the end of the presentation, 3 of the 5 companies had expressed serious interest in exploratory discussions. Within a month, 2 of them had signed contracts totaling $400,000 in annual revenue. The success of the manufacturing roundtable led to something even more significant: invitations to speak at industry conferences and contribute to trade publications. I found myself positioned as a thought leader in B2B marketing, specifically around the intersection of traditional relationship building and modern digital strategies. 6 months after my promotion to VP, I received an email that brought everything full circle. It was from Robert Hamilton, but this time he was writing in his capacity as incoming president of the Chicago Manufacturing Association. "Sarah, the association is planning a major conference on digital transformation in manufacturing, and I'd like to invite you to be our keynote speaker. Your work with Morrison Industries and other manufacturing companies has generated significant interest in our industry community. Would you be interested in presenting to an audience of 500-plus manufacturing executives about the future of B2B marketing? The speaking fee would be $15,000 plus expenses. A $15,000 speaking fee for sharing insights about marketing strategy, the same expertise that Marcus had dismissed as overstepping boundaries and not understanding my place." The transformation felt complete. From undervalued employee to recognized industry expert in less than 2 years. As I accepted Robert's invitation and began preparing my keynote presentation, I realized that my journey had become larger than personal vindication or professional success. It has become proof that talent and dedication ultimately create their own opportunities, regardless of temporary setbacks or toxic work environments. The speech I would give to those 500 manufacturing executives wouldn't be about getting revenge on a bad boss or proving doubters wrong. It would be about the future of business-to-business relationships in an increasingly digital world, and how smart companies could adapt without losing the personal connections that had always driven their success. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so successful that your former detractors become irrelevant to your story. Marcus Williams was now a footnote in my professional journey, a cautionary tale about the dangers of insecure leadership. Meanwhile, I was writing the next chapter of my career on a much larger stage. The keynote speech at the Chicago Manufacturing Association conference turned out to be a pivotal moment. Standing before 500 industry executives, I presented the future of B2B relationships, where personal connection meets digital innovation. The response was overwhelming. Standing ovation, dozens of business cards exchanged afterward, and 3 immediate consulting inquiries worth 6 figures each. But what happened after the conference was even more significant. A video recording of my presentation was shared across LinkedIn and industry forums, generating over 100,000 views and establishing me as a definitive voice on B2B marketing transformation. The Harvard Business Review reached out to commission an article based on my speech, and 2 major business podcasts requested interviews. "Sarah, you need to see this," David said, bursting into my office 3 days after the conference. He was holding his laptop, practically vibrating with excitement. "What now?" I asked, though his expression suggested good news. "Forbes wants to feature you in their 30 Under 30 Feet Marketing Leaders article. But that's not the big news." He turned the laptop toward me. "McKinsey & Company just called. They want to hire Titan Dynamics for a major consulting engagement with one of their Fortune 500 clients." I stared at the screen, which showed an email from a McKinsey partner requesting a meeting to discuss a, quote, strategic marketing transformation initiative for a global manufacturing conglomerate. The proposed engagement was worth $2.3 million over 18 months. "McKinsey doesn't typically work with startups," I said, still processing the implications. "Exactly. They specifically mentioned your keynote speech and the Harvard Business Review article draft they somehow got access to. They want our expertise on bridging traditional B2B relationships with digital transformation strategies." The irony was staggering. 2 years ago, Marcus had accused me of overstepping boundaries when I suggested strategic improvements for client campaigns. Now, one of the world's most prestigious consulting firms wanted to pay millions for those same strategic insights. 3 weeks later, I found myself in McKinsey's Chicago offices, presenting to a team of senior partners and their Fortune 500 client, Consolidated Manufacturing Group, a $15 billion industrial conglomerate struggling to modernize their customer acquisition approach. "Ms. Mitchell," said James Patterson, CMG's Chief Strategy Officer, "we've reviewed your work with Morrison Industries and the other manufacturing companies in your portfolio. The results are impressive. But can these strategies scale to a company of our size and complexity?" "James, that's exactly the right question," I replied. "Scaling B2B relationship strategies isn't about applying the same tactics at a larger volume. It's about creating systematic approaches that maintain personal connection while leveraging data and automation for efficiency." I clicked on a slide showing our proposed framework for CMG's transformation. "For a company of your scale, we're recommending a hybrid approach that segments your customer base by relationship complexity and purchasing behavior. High-value strategic accounts receive traditional relationship management enhanced by predictive analytics, while mid-market prospects enter automated nurturing sequences that feel personal but operate efficiently." The presentation continued for 90 minutes, covering everything from organizational change management to technology implementation timelines. By the end, CMG's executive team was asking detailed questions about implementation rather than whether the approach would work. "Sarah," said McKinsey partner Elizabeth Ward as we wrapped up, "CMG would like to move forward with this engagement. We're looking at an 18-month transformation initiative with quarterly milestones and measurable ROI targets." The $2.3 million McKinsey contract was transformational for Titan Dynamics, but it also created new challenges. We needed to hire additional senior-level strategists, expand our technology platform capabilities, and establish processes for managing Fortune 500-level engagements without losing the agility that made us successful. Over the next 6 months, I hired 12 new team members, including 2 former McKinsey consultants, a data scientist from Google, and a change management specialist who had led digital transformations at 3 major corporations. The marketing organization I'd started with Jessica Torres and Maria Gonzalez now employed 37 people across 3 offices. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. I was reviewing quarterly performance reports when my assistant, Amanda, knocked on my office door. "Sarah, you have a visitor who doesn't have an appointment," she said hesitantly. "It's Marcus Williams. He says it's important and won't take long." I hadn't seen Marcus in person since that devastating conference room meeting almost 2 years ago. Curiosity outweighed any residual animosity, so I agreed to see him. Marcus looked older than I remembered, with gray threading through his hair and stress lines around his eyes. His suit was still expensive, but it didn't quite fit the same way, as if he'd lost weight or confidence, or both. "Sarah, thank you for seeing me," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I know this is unexpected." "It is," I confirmed. "What brings you here, Marcus?" "I wanted to congratulate you in person," he said, his voice sincere. "I saw your Forbes article and the announcement about the McKinsey engagement. What you've accomplished is remarkable." I waited for him to continue, sensing there was more to this visit than congratulations. "I also wanted to ask for your advice," Marcus continued, looking uncomfortable. "My consulting practice hasn't been successful, and I'm considering whether to look for another corporate position or try a different approach entirely." The role reversal was complete. The man who had once lectured me about knowing my place was now asking for career guidance from the employee he'd tried to diminish. "What kind of advice are you looking for?" I asked. "Honestly, I don't know how to rebuild my reputation in this market. The agency world is smaller than I realized, and word gets around quickly about what happened at Pinnacle." I studied his face, seeing genuine humility that I'd never witnessed during our years of working together. "Marcus, can I ask you something directly?" "Of course. Do you understand what went wrong at Pinnacle? Not the surface-level issues, but the fundamental problems with how you managed people and client relationships." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I think so. I was so focused on protecting my position that I couldn't see how my behavior was actually undermining everything I was trying to protect." "That's part of it," I agreed. "But there's something deeper. You treated talented team members as threats rather than assets. You prioritized short-term ego protection over long-term business success. Most importantly, you never learned to add value through others. You only knew how to take credit for their work." "You're right," Marcus said quietly. "I can see that now, but I don't know how to change it. How do I rebuild trust when everyone in the industry knows about my failures?" I leaned back in my chair, considering how to respond. 2 years ago, I might have felt vindicated by his admission of failure. Now I felt something closer to professional obligation to share insights that might help him avoid repeating the same mistakes. "Marcus, the reason your consulting practice isn't working is because you're still thinking about this wrong," I said. "You're focused on rebuilding your reputation instead of building actual value for clients." "What do you mean?" "Look at my career trajectory since leaving Pinnacle. I didn't succeed because I got revenge on you or because I marketed myself better. I succeeded because I focused entirely on delivering exceptional results for clients and building a team that could scale those results." I pulled up our client portfolio on my computer screen. Every single client relationship we have started because we solved a specific problem better than anyone else could. The reputation followed the results, not the other way around. Marcus nodded, taking notes on his phone. "So you're saying I should focus on what I can actually deliver rather than trying to repair past damage?" "Exactly. Find a niche where you can genuinely add value, maybe smaller companies that need basic marketing strategy development, or businesses in transition that need operational efficiency improvements. Build a track record of success in that area before trying to compete for larger, more prestigious accounts." "That makes sense," Marcus said. "I've been trying to land the same kind of clients I managed at Pinnacle, but I don't have the infrastructure or team to deliver at that level." "There's something else," I added. "If you do rebuild your practice, you need to completely change how you think about talent management. Hire people who are smarter than you in specific areas, give them credit for their contributions, and focus on creating an environment where excellent work can flourish. Marcus was quiet for several moments, apparently processing this advice. Sarah, I know this is awkward given our history, but would you be willing to serve as a reference for me? Not for client work, but for character development, I guess? The request was unexpected and slightly uncomfortable. What exactly would that involve? I'm working with an executive coach to address some of the leadership issues you've mentioned. She suggested getting feedback from former colleagues about specific areas for improvement. You obviously have the most direct experience with my management failures. I considered the request. Helping Marcus improve as a leader wouldn't benefit me directly, but it might prevent other talented professionals from experiencing the kind of treatment I'd endured. I'd be willing to speak with your coach about specific behavioral patterns and their impact on team performance, I said. But I want to be clear. I'm not vouching for your character or recommending you for positions. I'm providing objective feedback about areas that need improvement. That's all I'm asking for, Marcus said. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but maybe I can learn from it and do better going forward. After Marcus left, I sat in my office reflecting on how strange life could be. The man who had nearly destroyed my confidence was now asking me to help rebuild his career. More importantly, I felt no satisfaction from his struggles, only a professional interest in whether people could truly change their fundamental approach to leadership. That evening, I called Jennifer to share the day's surreal developments. Wait, Marcus came to your office asking for career advice? She said, her voice incredulous. I don't even have a comparison for how bizarre that is. It was definitely unexpected, I agreed. But you know what? He seemed genuinely different. Humbled, maybe even a little bit wise about his mistakes. Do you think people like that actually change? Jennifer asked. Or do they just get better at hiding their true nature when circumstances force them to? It was a fair question. I don't know, but I figure if there's even a small chance that helping him become a better leader prevents other people from going through what I experienced, it's worth the time investment. You're more generous than I would be, Jennifer said. But then again, you can afford to be generous now. You've won so completely that his success or failure doesn't affect you anymore. She was right. My career had reached a point where Marcus's rehabilitation was interesting but irrelevant to my own trajectory. I was operating in different markets with different clients at a different level of strategic responsibility. The next month brought another milestone that drove home just how far I'd traveled from my pinnacle days. The Chicago Business Journal named me Marketing Executive of the Year, and the award ceremony was held at the same downtown hotel where Pinnacle had hosted their annual holiday parties. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of 300 marketing professionals, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The speech I gave focused on the importance of ethical leadership and creating environments where talented people could do their best work. Success in our industry isn't about individual brilliance or political maneuvering, I said. It's about building teams where every member feels empowered to contribute their expertise, where good ideas are rewarded regardless of hierarchy, and where client success is the ultimate measure of our value. As I accepted the Crystal Award, I noticed several familiar faces in the audience, former Pinnacle colleagues who had moved on to other agencies, clients who had followed me to Titan Dynamics, and industry peers who had watched my career transformation with interest. But what struck me most was the absence of anyone from Pinnacle's leadership team. The company that had once been a major player in Chicago's marketing scene was now irrelevant to industry conversations about innovation and excellence. After the ceremony, Robert Hamilton approached me at the reception. Sarah, I have some news that I think you'll find interesting, he said with a knowing smile. Good news, I hope? The best kind. Morrison Industries is expanding our relationship with Titan Dynamics. We want to bring you in as strategic marketing consultants for our 3 subsidiary companies. The combined engagement would be worth about $800,000 annually. I nearly dropped my award. Robert, that's incredible news. But I have to ask, are you sure Morrison wants to invest that much in marketing consulting? Sarah, we've seen what happens when we work with marketing partners who actually understand our business. The ROI is undeniable. Robert paused. Plus, I'll be honest, our board has been asking how we found such an effective marketing partner. When I tell them the story of how we discovered your talents, it becomes a case study in recognizing value regardless of corporate titles or company size. The Morrison expansion would make them our largest client, representing nearly 15% of Titan Dynamics' total revenue. More importantly, it would establish us as the preferred marketing partner for mid-market manufacturing companies throughout the Midwest. As the evening wound down, I found myself outside the hotel, looking up at the Chicago skyline and thinking about the distance I'd traveled, not just geographically, but professionally and personally. 2.5 years ago, I'd been a frustrated employee whose contributions were minimized and whose ideas were dismissed. Tonight, I was an award-winning executive, leading a rapidly growing company, serving clients who valued strategic thinking over political positioning. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been driven by luck or market timing. It had been the result of consistent focus on delivering value, building relationships based on mutual respect, and creating an organization where talented people could thrive. Marcus Williams had tried to teach me to know my place. Instead, he had inadvertently taught me to create my own place, one where competence was rewarded, innovation was encouraged, and success was measured by the value we delivered to clients, rather than the politics we navigated. Standing there in downtown Chicago, holding an award that represented industry recognition of everything Marcus had tried to suppress, I realized that the best revenge truly was living well. Not just financially or professionally, but ethically, building something meaningful that would outlast any individual career or personal grudge. 6 months after receiving the Marketing Executive of the Year award, an opportunity arose that would test everything I'd learned about leadership, strategy, and ethical business practices. The call came on a Tuesday morning from an unexpected source, Brad Morrison, my former colleague from Pinnacle. "Sarah, I know this might sound strange coming from me," Brad said, his voice carrying a nervousness I remembered from our Pinnacle days. "But I'm in a situation where I could really use your expertise, and I'm hoping you might be willing to hear me out." I leaned back in my chair, intrigued despite myself. Brad had been Marcus's loyal lieutenant during the worst of my harassment, but he'd also been genuinely incompetent rather than malicious. "I'm listening, Brad. I've been working at Digital Solutions Midwest for the past year. It's a mid-sized agency here in Chicago. The company is struggling, and they've brought me in as interim marketing director to try to turn things around." He paused. "Sarah, they're about to lose their 3 biggest clients, and if that happens, 30 people will lose their jobs." The situation was familiar: an agency in crisis, leadership that had lost client confidence, and employees whose livelihoods depended on decisions made by people above their pay grade. But what made it interesting was Brad's next statement. "The clients aren't leaving because of service quality or pricing issues," he continued. "They're leaving because they don't trust the agency's leadership to handle their strategic needs." 2 of them specifically mentioned that they'd consider staying if the agency brought in external strategic consulting to oversee their accounts. I could see where this was heading. "And you think Titan Dynamics might be interested in a consulting arrangement with Digital Solutions Midwest? I think you might be interested in a challenge that could save jobs while demonstrating that successful agencies can collaborate rather than just compete," Brad said. "The 3 clients represent $900,000 in annual revenue. If we can retain them and stabilize the agency, it creates a win-win situation." The proposal was intriguing on multiple levels. Digital Solutions Midwest served exactly the kind of mid-market clients that Titan Dynamics excelled with, but they were struggling with the strategic positioning and relationship management that had become our specialty. A consulting arrangement could provide them with the expertise they needed while giving us access to new client relationships without the overhead of a full acquisition. "Brad, I'd need to understand the specifics before making any commitments," I said. "But I'm willing to have an exploratory conversation. Can you send me details about the clients and the challenges they're facing?" 3 days later, I found myself in the modest offices of Digital Solutions Midwest, meeting with their CEO, Patricia Reynolds, and the 3 clients who were considering ending their relationships. The contrast with Titan Dynamics' sleek facilities was stark, but what struck me more was the palpable tension in the room. "Ms. Mitchell," said Gregory Walsh, CEO of Midwest Manufacturing Consortium, "we've heard impressive things about your work with other manufacturing companies. Our concern isn't with the day-to-day execution that digital solutions provides. It's with the strategic direction and senior-level oversight. Patricia Reynolds looked uncomfortable as Gregory continued. We need a marketing partner who can think strategically about market positioning, competitive differentiation, and long-term growth initiatives. Those aren't strengths of the current leadership team. The criticism was direct but fair. Patricia was clearly competent at operations and client service, but she lacked the strategic background needed to guide complex B2B marketing initiatives. It was a common problem in the agency world. Excellent tacticians who were promoted beyond their strategic capabilities. What we're proposing, I said, is a hybrid model where Titan Dynamics provides strategic oversight and direction, while Digital Solutions handles implementation and day-to-day client service. You get access to enterprise-level strategic thinking without paying enterprise-level fees. The second client, Janet Phillips from Advanced Technologies Corp., leaned forward with interest. How would that work practically? We don't want to manage relationships with multiple vendors. You wouldn't, I replied. Digital Solutions would remain your primary contact for all communications and deliverables. Titan Dynamics would work behind the scenes to ensure strategic alignment and provide specialized expertise when needed. Over the next 2 hours, we developed a framework that addressed everyone's concerns. Digital Solutions would retain the client relationships and day-to-day account management, while Titan Dynamics would provide strategic consulting, senior-level oversight, and specialized capabilities like advanced analytics and marketing automation. The financial arrangement was equally innovative. Instead of competing for the clients directly, Titan Dynamics would receive a consulting fee from Digital Solutions based on client retention and performance improvements. If the clients stayed and their results improved, both agencies would benefit. If the arrangement failed, both would lose. This is unlike anything I've seen in the agency world, said Patricia after the clients had left to discuss the proposal. Usually consultants come in to recommend changes, collect their fees, and leave. You're proposing to tie your success directly to our long-term client retention. That's exactly right, I confirmed. Titan Dynamics succeeds when our clients succeed, whether they're working with us directly or through partnerships like this one. The arrangement proved successful beyond anyone's expectations. Within 6 months, all 3 clients had not only renewed their contracts but expanded their engagements significantly. Digital Solutions Midwest stabilized financially and began attracting new clients who were drawn to their combination of personal service and strategic expertise. More importantly, the partnership model became a template for how Titan Dynamics could scale our impact without the overhead and complexity of traditional acquisitions. We developed similar arrangements with agencies in Milwaukee, Indianapolis, and Kansas City, creating a network of strategic partnerships that extended our reach throughout the Midwest. The success of these collaborations caught the attention of the American Marketing Association, which invited me to present a case study on collaborative competition in the B2B agency world at their national conference in San Francisco. The presentation would be my first major speaking engagement on the West Coast, and it represented an opportunity to establish Titan Dynamics as a thought leader on a national level. But preparing for the AMA conference also brought an unexpected personal milestone. While researching industry trends for my presentation, I discovered that Pinnacle Marketing Solutions had officially ceased operations. The company that had once employed 60 people and managed millions in client relationships had quietly dissolved, with its remaining assets sold to a national agency network. The news came through a brief announcement in Advertising Age. Chicago-based Pinnacle Marketing Solutions has closed its doors after 15 years of operation. Financial difficulties and client departures led to the decision to wind down operations and transfer remaining accounts to Omnicom subsidiary Network Plus. I felt a complex mix of emotions reading the announcement. There was no satisfaction in seeing a company fail. 60 people had lost their jobs, and several clients had faced disruption during the transition. But there was also a sense of professional vindication in understanding how completely the toxic leadership culture had destroyed what could have been a successful agency. Jennifer called me within an hour of the announcement being published. "Did you see the news about Pinnacle?" she asked. "Just read it," I replied. "How are you feeling about it?" "Honestly, grateful that I got out when I did, but also sad for the people who didn't have other options." Jennifer paused. "I ran into Tom Bradley from our old accounting department last week. He said the final 18 months were brutal. Constant client losses, staff turnover, and management that seemed to have no idea how to stop the bleeding. What about the clients? Did they transition smoothly to other agencies? That's the interesting part. Tom said most of the remaining clients specifically requested recommendations for agencies that could provide Sarah Mitchell-level strategic thinking. Even after all this time, your reputation was still what clients used as their benchmark for quality. The irony was remarkable. The same strategic thinking that Marcus had labeled as overstepping boundaries had become the standard by which Pinnacle's former clients evaluated potential new partners. The AMA conference in San Francisco exceeded my expectations in every way. The presentation on collaborative competition was attended by over 400 marketing executives, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. During the Q&A session, several agency CEOs expressed interest in exploring similar partnership models with Titan Dynamics. But the most significant moment came during the networking reception, when I was approached by Helen Morrison, Chief Marketing Officer of Peterson Industries, a Fortune 500 manufacturing conglomerate based in California. Ms. Mitchell, I attended your presentation this afternoon, and I'm very interested in discussing how your collaborative model might apply to our current agency relationships, Helen said. Peterson Industries works with 6 different agencies across various product lines, and we're struggling with strategic consistency and senior-level oversight. The opportunity Helen described was massive. Peterson Industries spent over $12 million annually on marketing services, but their decentralized approach meant they lacked the strategic coordination needed to maximize their investment. They were essentially paying for 6 different strategies when they needed one integrated approach. Helen, this sounds like exactly the kind of challenge our partnership model was designed to address, I said. Instead of disrupting your existing agency relationships, we could provide strategic oversight and coordination to ensure all 6 agencies are working toward aligned objectives. Over the next 3 days in San Francisco, Helen and I developed a comprehensive proposal for Peterson Industries. Titan Dynamics would serve as their strategic marketing partner, providing oversight, coordination, and specialized expertise, while their existing agencies continued handling execution and day-to-day client service. The Peterson engagement would be worth $2.8 million annually, the largest single contract in Titan Dynamics history. More importantly, it would establish us as the premier strategic marketing consultancy for Fortune 500 manufacturing companies nationwide. Flying back to Chicago, I reflected on how dramatically my professional landscape had changed. 3 years ago, I'd been an undervalued employee, fighting for recognition within a single agency. Now, I was leading strategic initiatives for Fortune 500 companies while pioneering new models for agency collaboration. The transformation hadn't happened accidentally. Every decision had been guided by the same principles that Marcus had tried to suppress. Prioritizing client value over internal politics, building teams based on competence rather than loyalty, and focusing on long-term relationship building rather than short-term ego gratification. 2 weeks after returning from San Francisco, I received a call that brought my journey full circle in the most unexpected way. The caller was Rebecca Martinez, a headhunter specializing in senior marketing executives. Sarah, I have a very unusual opportunity that I think you should consider, Rebecca said. Network Plus, the agency that acquired Pinnacle's remaining assets, is looking for a new managing director for their Chicago operations. They specifically asked me to reach out to you. I nearly laughed out loud. Rebecca, I appreciate the call, but I'm not interested in working for the company that bought Pinnacle's scraps. I understand your hesitation, Rebecca replied. But hear me out. Network Plus wants to completely rebuild their Chicago presence from scratch. They're offering complete autonomy to develop a new operating model, unlimited hiring authority, and a compensation package that includes significant equity in their parent company. What kind of compensation are we talking about? I asked, more out of curiosity than genuine interest. Base salary of $350,000, performance bonuses that could double that, and equity that could be worth millions if Network Plus goes public as planned. Plus, they want you to develop a new collaborative model based on your work with Titan Dynamics. The offer was staggering, nearly triple my current compensation plus equity in a major agency network. But what made it truly interesting was the strategic opportunity to scale the collaborative model I'd developed at a much larger level. Rebecca, I'm flattered by the offer, but I'd need to understand their vision more clearly. Are they looking for someone to run a traditional agency, or are they genuinely interested in developing new approaches to client service? That's exactly what they want to discuss with you. The CEO, Michael Patterson, has been following your work since the McKinsey engagement. He believes the future of the agency business requires exactly the kind of innovation you've been pioneering. I agreed to meet with Michael Patterson, primarily to understand how large agency networks were thinking about industry evolution. The meeting took place at Network Plus's corporate headquarters in New York, in a conference room overlooking Central Park. Michael was not what I'd expected from a major agency CEO. Instead of the polished corporate executive I'd anticipated, he was a former entrepreneur who had built and sold 2 successful startups before joining Network Plus through an acquisition. Sarah, I've been studying your career trajectory for the past year, Michael said as we settled into our meeting. What you've accomplished at Titan Dynamics represents exactly the kind of thinking the agency world needs to embrace. Thank you, I replied. But I'm curious why Network Plus is interested in innovation now. Most large agency networks seem focused on scale and efficiency rather than new operating models. Because the old models are failing, Michael said bluntly. Clients are increasingly dissatisfied with traditional agency relationships. They want strategic partners, not service providers. They want innovation, not process optimization. Most importantly, they want senior-level thinking applied to their challenges, not junior-level execution managed by senior-level account directors. His analysis was exactly what I'd been arguing for years, that the agency world's focus on leverage and profit margins had created a fundamental disconnect between what clients needed and what agencies delivered. The opportunity I'm offering you, Michael continued, is to build a new kind of agency within Network Plus's infrastructure. Complete operational autonomy, unlimited hiring budget, and the freedom to develop whatever models you think will best serve clients. The only requirement is that it needs to be profitable and scalable. And you're comfortable with an approach that might disrupt traditional agency economics? I asked. Sarah, traditional agency economics are already being disrupted by consulting firms, technology companies, and in-house marketing teams. We can either lead that disruption or be destroyed by it. The conversation continued for 3 hours, covering everything from organizational structure to compensation models to client acquisition strategies. By the end, I had to admit that Michael's vision was compelling. The resources of a major agency network, combined with the freedom to innovate and experiment. But I also knew that accepting the Network Plus offer would mean leaving David, Titan Dynamics, and the team I'd built over the past 3 years. It would mean walking away from equity in a rapidly growing company and relationships that had been personally and professionally fulfilling. Michael, I appreciate the offer and the confidence you're showing in my approach, I said as our meeting concluded. But I need time to consider whether this opportunity aligns with my long-term goals. Of course, take whatever time you need. But Sarah, I want you to understand something. This isn't just about hiring a talented executive. We're offering you the chance to reshape how the entire industry thinks about client relationships and value creation. Flying back to Chicago, I found myself facing the biggest career decision since leaving Pinnacle. The Network Plus opportunity represented validation at the highest level of the industry, plus compensation that would set me up financially for life. But it also meant leaving behind everything I'd built and starting over within a large corporate structure. The man who had tried to diminish my potential had inadvertently freed me to realize it fully. Now I had to decide whether that potential was best realized by continuing to build something new or by transforming something established from within. Either way, Marcus Williams could never have imagined that his attempts to suppress my attitude problems would ultimately lead to opportunities at the very pinnacle of the marketing industry. And that was the sweetest victory of all. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.